Hello and welcome to the podcast, Get Rich Without Being a Bitch. And I'm Vanessa Shaw, your host for this journey that we're going to be taking on. Listen, I feel like we're going to be covering some really important topics, especially if you are a woman in business, you want to create wealth on your own terms, and you want to live richly without burning out. In this podcast, I'm going to be sharing topics, strategies, mindset changes that are going to help you shatter glass ceilings, challenge stereotypes, and frankly, be the best version of you so that you can define life and live it on your terms. Welcome. Please make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. So welcome to this episode of Get Rich Without Being a Bitch. Listen, I want to share with you a little bit more about my backstory and really what's provoked me to want to create this podcast and share this with so many people. The truth is, it took me nearly going bankrupt to realize that I had a real dysfunctional relationship with money, that I had inherited beliefs and assumptions about how life should be and how business should be. And it was a really dark moment in my life that I needed to turn around. And at that time, I felt really alone. I thought it was me. And then I discovered that this is something that affects a lot of women. So let me just take you back in time for a while, and I'll tell you how this kind of all came about. I had been a stay-at-home mum for many years, for nearly 10 years with my two kids. I didn't manage the finances at home. I wasn't in business for myself back then. And I actually retrained as a life coach. And this is probably going back nearly 20 years ago now. And very soon after training, I landed a big corporate deal. It was a 6-figure deal. I honestly kind of felt like I'd fluked it. I was a bit of an imposter. I thought I was going to be found out. And it was great. I was doing some really meaningful work. I was feeling challenged. And I kept this contract going for several years. And then as things would happen, there were internal changes in the organization that meant that my contract was being cut. And here was the thing. I actually had no idea how I was ever going to replace that income. I felt like I needed to either go back to being a stay-at-home mom, go get a job somewhere. I was completely lost. But worse still was when my Swiss accountant called me up to tell me that if I didn't turn things around, I was going to have to file for bankruptcy. You see, I'd been earning really good money, but I certainly wasn't keeping it. My lifestyle had exploded. I was doing all these exciting, cool things. My wardrobe improved, my home life improved. There was a lot of travel, a lot of other good things. Yes, I was investing back in my business. But now I was faced with this call of my Swiss accountant saying, Madame Shaw, you really have to turn this around. Otherwise, it's game over. And I honestly felt so ashamed and humiliated at the time. I had no idea how I'd even really got to this point. I was like, I'm a smart woman. Everybody else was looking at me as if I was really successful. In fact, I knew that I was quite the envy of certain people within my circle. And the shame that I felt that I'd asked for my family, my husband to believe in me, to back me as I went into business for myself, to now be facing bankruptcy felt just too much. And I got to be honest with you, there was a time when it felt really easy to just throw in the towel. I didn't have a plan B. I didn't have my escape plan in place. But there was also a morning when it was really my lowest point that my husband looked at me and said, you know what, Vanessa, you are really good at the work that you do. You are going to figure out this thing in business. You're going to learn some new skills and you're going to turn this around. You're not just going to give up now. And I realized that my desire for doing great work, for doing meaningful work, to continue and grow my coaching business as it was actually stronger, thankfully, than the shame and the embarrassment that I was experiencing back then. And so I started to really look into what was it that had caused this. And a couple of the things that I learned that I'm going to be diving deeper into along this podcast was that, frankly, I had a pretty dysfunctional relationship with money. I knew how to actually generate it back then. I'd been pretty good on doing the sales and actually getting that contract. I wasn't so good at keeping it. And I didn't realize that my own kind of money thermostat was set at a certain amount that whenever I started to earn more, I was unconsciously and uncomfortable and I'd start to give it away. I mean, not literally give it away, but in my case, I was spending it. So there were so many things that I started to learn. I started to discover as well that I believed I needed to be a certain way in business. For me, I had this idea in my head that I really had to be a cold-hearted bitch in order to get ahead. And that felt so in conflict with who I wanted to be in the world and how I wanted to be as a role model, particularly to my kids as they were growing up. So I had all of these assumptions and ideas and lacking of skill sets that was playing out for me that had created this situation. Now, I've got to be honest with you, I kept it really quiet for quite some time. Again, that embarrassment, the anxiety, the shame, and the guilt, it keeps us in the shadows, right? But as I started to reveal parts of my story to other women who were in business, and as I started to feel safer about sharing that, so many women came forward and said that they really resonated and that they had similar experiences or that they were struggling with the financial part of their business. So that's really the backdrop as to why I wanted to create this podcast. Most importantly, it was really important for me to be a good role model for my kids growing up. I didn't want them to be battling with the same things that I had battled with. And I knew full well that if I threw in the towel back then, it was going to be game over. I would have probably gone back to being a stay-at-home mum, probably, had a small job somewhere and feeling that level of frustration. But I listened to my desires. I listened to the fact that I always knew I was destined for more. And I suspect that's what you're feeling today as you listen into this. You know you're destined for a bigger game and there's just some things lacking. So that's some of the backdrop of the journey that we're going to be going on together. So if you know that there's some things that are really holding you back, particularly around finances and money, I have put together a brand new download, and I'm going to make sure we get it in the show notes below. It's all about the 7 money blind spots that are holding you back. These were the main ones that were holding me back. They're the ones I share with my clients today, and I know that you're going to find that super, super powerful to work through. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. I don't want you missing any episodes. So be sure to subscribe on your favorite platforms for Apple Podcasts and Spotify.